Hello and welcome everybody to the Chartwell Agency Lunch Bite Seminar. Thank you so much everybody for joining us. We're so glad to be able to provide a little bit of information through this webinar series. Many of you who are registered already know us. You're our clients, you're our friends. But for those of you who are new faces, first, welcome. We're so glad you could join us. A little bit about Chartwell Agency. We are a marketing and public relations firm. We have 3 areas of expertise, including healthcare, financial, and education, though we often get the opportunity to work with clients outside of those 3 areas. Again, thank you and hello to all of our clients who are on here, and welcome to our new friends. A little bit of housekeeping for you about the webinar series. There you go. The one thing I want to draw your attention to is use that chat box. In fact, right now, why don't you use the chat? Let us know where you're watching from so we can kind of see who's on the line with us today and introduce one another. We can build a community that will continue to grow over the next 5 weeks. Today's topic is what happens when your marketing plan goes out the window, because literally that has just happened to all of us. How do we survive and even thrive when there are unforeseen circumstances? So that is our topic today. What we will cover is how do we shift our perspective? How do we take a moment to see this as an opportunity and bring our best selves and our creativity to the table, doing what we do best? Second thing we're going to talk about is making the case for marketing. There are no shortage of stories out there about what people should be doing with their marketing budgets, whether we should be going dark, whether we should be pausing, whether we should just be reframing. So we're going to talk a little bit about things you can do to continue to make the case for marketing and to help your C-suite, help your leadership make the best decisions possible. We're going to talk about defining new goals, because when our situations change, our goals should change. And very often that means we have to reimagine strategies. Sound good? Okay, great. Let's get started. So there is no such thing as status quo. The only constant is change. And as marketers, we know this, but I love the expression, this too shall pass. But the thing about that is this too shall pass feels really good when things are hard and challenging, but this too shall pass often happens even when things are good. Again, the only constant is change. And we were having, many of our clients, many of you out there were having really great years up until, less than a month ago. So no such thing as status quo. The only constant is change, and we need to respond to that. Now, when you have a plan and you're starting to make great progress and you're feeling really good about it, it's very stressful when everything changes. And so as leaders in marketing departments, as members of teams, or as executives in the leadership of an organization, we need to recognize that this is stressful. And when things are stressful, we don't always bring our best selves. And when we don't bring our best selves as leaders, it impacts the way our teams contribute. And at this point in time, we all need to be bringing the very best ideas, the very best creativity, our very best to this scenario. Vital Smarts did a study of managers under stress. And as you can see by some of the results, our tendencies are often not great. That being said, we're humans and we don't respond well to change generally. It is difficult for us. So I think the best advice that we can give to our teams, and really we can take for ourselves, is to give ourselves a little grace, that we have to take care of ourselves and recognize that we are honest, that this is challenging and that it does impact our interactions, and give ourselves a little grace. And then we need to extend that to our team members. When we do that, when we control our responses, when we listen a little longer, when we take some care in the way we communicate, we're more likely to have better outcomes and to come up with better ideas. So take a minute if you have to, recognize that this is hard, recognize that you may not be reacting in the best way, and knowledge is power. So take that moment, give your team that moment, and then get back to it and do what you do really well, which is look for the opportunity. In this situation, it's important that we find that spark that helps us bring the creativity back to the table, that helps us re-energize our team, that helps reframe a challenge as an opportunity. Maybe this is a chance to launch a product that you haven't had a lot of success with before. I'll give an example for our financial clients. Maybe that means that online banking is really going to surge, and those members or those customers who were reluctant to use it are now having to embrace it. This is an opportunity to transition some of those behaviors. Find the thing that you get to do that this presents as an opportunity, and then you'll inspire that a little bit of creativity you need to bring to the table. And then my last piece of advice for you here is make sure that you find your own voice, that consumers are looking to brands and they need that familiarity. They need you to be the trusted source that they know you to be. So finding your own voice through this is not a time to just copy and paste the same thing others are doing or saying. While we can look to best practices, it's important to reframe in your own voice. Again, as marketers, you're good at this. You know your brand voice, you know your consumers, and while things may have shifted around you, you can still present information in a way that's authentic to your brand and contributes to the long-term brand health. So what are your to-dos here? One, recognize that this is hard and it is stressful, and we are human and we are impacted by that stress. But if we take a moment, we can then reframe this as an opportunity, and we can define our own voice and strategies and tactics to move forward so that we're successful not only in this moment, but beyond the moment. So the next thing we're going to talk about is making the case for marketing. I will try to avoid using the phrase unprecedented times because I know we've all heard it a lot, but the challenge that we are faced with today is particularly difficult because we don't have good information about what people do in situations like this because it has never happened before. So because this is unprecedented, there I went ahead and I said it, there is no data that says this is the way that you should behave, but we can look to other downturns and we can look to the lessons learned from other recessions and what brands did that worked well and what brands did that wasn't successful. And then we also can invest in marketing research. We need to know what our customers are thinking and knowing and feeling. And actually, this is a really big topic for next week's session, so I won't get into it too much right now, but marketing research is really critical right now because we don't have good data on which to rely. There's also evidence from history that says that companies that invest in marketing and they do it thoughtfully and as part of a really good, well-executed strategy that makes sense for the time, they can slingshot ahead of competition because let's face it, some companies can't afford to continue the marketing at the level they were. So they're going to open up bandwidth, and who absorbs that bandwidth in terms of share of voice or market share is going to come out ahead after the recession. So there is evidence to suggest that marketing through a recession may be a really good strategy. And at the end of the day, this isn't about abandoning what you've been doing. No company can coast forever on the momentum that it's built. At some point, you need to reinvest in long-term brand health. So this is about adapting rather than abandoning. We need to look and perhaps cut marketing, not with an axe, but with a scalpel. We need to be very thoughtful about what we're doing and make decisions that are in the long-term best interest of the brand, balancing the need to be cost effective and the need perhaps to reduce if that's in the best interest of the organization. But we also need to make sure that our C-suite understands the consequences to long-term brand health and that they're prepared for that. So just to illustrate, no recession is the same, no reactions to that are the same, but you can have great results. Here's 3 really interesting examples to share. Great Depression. Post was the clear leader in cereal. During the Great Depression, Kellogg's wanted to introduce a new product. It was called Rice Krispies, and they had 3 characters, Snap, Crackle, and Pop. They decided they were going to continue with launching the new product. They invested heavily in radio, and as a result of that, they were able to grow by 30%. They took over as the category leader, and that is a spot they still maintain today. So talk about long-term consequences for Post in that regard. The second example is from the 1970s. There was the energy crisis, which led to about a 17-month recession. For the first time ever, the U.S. published a miles per gallon efficiency report, and a lesser-known brand, Toyota, appeared as the #2 most fuel-efficient vehicle. Instead of just coasting on that earned media, that earned recognition from the list, they decided to invest heavily in advertising. And as a result, after the recession, they became the #2 imported vehicle in the US. They bumped Volkswagen from that position. Finally, in the 1990s, we had McDonald's. Here's an example of a brand who said, I think we can coast. Let's go dark. Let's save the money. We're big enough. We can afford to lose a little bit of our market share. So they made that decision thoughtfully. They stopped some of their advertising in the 90s. As a result, Pizza Hut and Taco Bell were very eager to pick up some of that share of voice and share of market. Pizza Hut sales increased by 61%. McDonald's declined by 28%, and Taco Bell grew by 40%. So here's an example of an industry leader who gave up some of their market share because they gave up some of their share of voice in advertising. They let those lesser known competitors kind of jump in. So 3 different recessions, 3 different responses to advertising, 3 different thought processes, but all had long-term brand implications. So the questions you should be posing to your C-suite to make sure that everybody at the table understands the short and the long-term consequences of adjusting our marketing strategy is, 1, can we afford, do we want to emerge from this a weaker brand? Right now, this is about expansion or contraction. Now, there may be reasons that you need to reduce spending or show some cost efficiencies, but that needs to be done thoughtfully, understanding the results on the other end. What happens if we go dark? What are we sacrificing? So thinking through, like the McDonald's example, what are we giving up, and what could be a result of that, so that we're making, again, that decision thoughtfully. And if others are making the decision to retract, there's an opportunity, there's a void. Who's going to fill that void? Should it be us? Will it be another company? So again, just questions to help reframe and help you best adjust and counsel leadership of your organization about the importance, the role of marketing, and how, while we may need to make some tough decisions, we also need to be thinking long-term. So your to-dos from this section: advocate proactively, share the importance of long-term health, and use data and insight to frame your position. If you're going in front of your C-suite, make sure that you have data to share with them, that you have thought through your strategies, and that you are ready to inform them about what your recommendations are. So now it's time to look at new goals and results. And it can be challenging when you have spent so much time building up a solid program. You're starting to see results. You're starting to really deliver. This part is hard. But again, if we found the opportunity and we've thought about the long-term brand, we can make some good decisions here as well. So 3 questions I really want you to consider as you think through what your strategy should be and what would be appropriate, what feels good right now. And the first is, what do my customers feel right now? The second is, what do they need right now? And the third is, how can we be of service? So for my finance, my credit unions out there, my community banks and others listening, what do your customers feel right now? They feel anxious and unsure. They might be having to use resources they're not familiar with, and they need to know that you are stable, that you're going to be around, and that you're going to be there for them. You may not be serving them in the same way, but you're still there. For my healthcare clients, what do they feel right now? They feel anxious. They feel anxious. They need information. They need to be reassured by you, because according to research, the healthcare institutions are everybody's most preferred source for information and most trusted source. So really, your patients, your communities, and the nation is looking to you for information right now. How can we be of service? How can we provide for that? Those are really important questions to ask yourself. I have a question coming in about nonprofits and what nonprofits should be doing. Again, what do customers feel right now? Well, it kind of depends on your nonprofit and what you serve. I've seen some really great examples from, say, arts organizations or others. What do customers feel? General research is telling us that they are looking local, so localizing your message. If you are a national nonprofit, you'll certainly want to localize that. What do customers need right now? They need reassurance that you are responding, that you have a plan, and that there's some stability there. How can we be of service right now? Many of you are on the front lines, and it's okay to tell that story and to be a part of that. it's going to be a fine line as to whether now is an appropriate time to ask for support or whether we wait. Most research coming out of big research firms like Dynata and Kantar is telling us that most consumers feel like about 6 months. So we may need to look at strategies that take us 6 months into the future. I hope that answers your question, but keep asking in the chat. We've talked a little bit about market research. I want to make sure you all know that there are some very large research firms who are making research available to you. They're making it free to the public and free to brands to access. Dynata is one that just published some information about consumer perceptions and as it relates to COVID. Those are on their websites. There's webinars you can take advantage of. Use that insight. And also lean on insight from your media vendors and media partners. They can tell you about behaviors, they can share what they're seeing, and they want to be a part of your solution. For your research, you should be focusing on your current customers. They are your most valuable asset, and they are the ones that's most cost effective to maintain. You're going to want to be looking at their behavior. Now, as marketers, we know our brand, we know our customers. The problem is that we don't know how they react in this situation because it hasn't happened before. So we really need to be looking at behaviors and really examining what's happening now so that we can respond to them. Again, what do they feel? What do they need? How can we be of service? I also really recommend listening to the chatter. One of the great things social media does for us is it allows for engagement with our audience. It allows for more of a two-way conversation. So you should be monitoring the conversations on those social platforms. That's where you can really get a sense of where your customers, your members, your patients, where your communities are right now. So listen to the chatter, take that under advisement. And again, lean on some research that's available to you free from these large marketing research firms. It's great that they're making that available. Lean on your media partners, lean on your vendors to give you some insight. Also, this is the basic triage that you may need to do if you're dealing with reduced resources in terms of your budget or in terms of your staff. You will divide your products and services into one of these three categories. Either their survival prospects are poor. That may be, something that's in a declining area that doesn't make sense to support. It doesn't make sense to send resources to something that doesn't look like it's going to be able to survive or doesn't make sense anymore given new behaviors. The second category is it may be declining, but it can be stabilized. For my healthcare subspecialty practices that might be doing elective surgeries, you probably fall into this category that right now we're seeing a decline, but we need to stabilize that brand, stabilize that awareness because we expect that it will return hopefully to pre-situation levels. And then you have the last category, which is likely to flourish. So a great example for my financial institutions, this might be all of your online services, or for my healthcare providers, this might be your telehealth, that these new behaviors that consumers are having to adopt are likely to carry over beyond this COVID-19 reality. And so these very well may flourish. This is where we might want to be investing even more or reallocating from those poor survival prospects into the likely to flourish category. So really looking at your product, your service mix. I will say that in the likely to flourish, it may mean introducing even a new product. So going back to our Kellogg's example, it doesn't mean that you don't introduce new products right now. It does mean that you look at where they fall and invest resources appropriately. So now that you've gotten your data, you've gotten your insight, it's time to create new strategies. We have alignment from the C-suite and from your team about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Again, inform your decisions. We talked a little bit about this in market research, but behaviors are changing. Some of those behaviors are changing in the short run, and some of them are likely to continue even after this COVID-19 reality. Here's some data from some of our media partners about how media consumption has changed and how clients are asking us, what should I be doing with my ad buy? Can you help me reallocate dollars? And so this is some of the insight that we've been working with. Any surprises there? I think one of the most interesting things is the number of people shifting to local news. So your local news air times are really high right now. So I think that's interesting. And of course, digital is where people are. It's where they're getting information. And it's where brands need to be as well. So if you don't have a thoughtful digital strategy, now might be a good time to look at the best way to do that. While you are informing your decision about what you might want to do, you should also be looking at what you are currently running and determining whether or not that makes sense now. If you don't take the time to evaluate, you may continue to run something that's not appropriate or doesn't have the right tone. And we have kind of an example of that right here. Okay, so I don't want you to have to watch the full a minute plus of people licking their fingers. I mean, that's pretty cringe-worthy for germaphobes on a good day, but this was a KFC ad. We didn't get all the way to the end, but it's basically a take on their finger looking good. This ran in the UK, and it started running before COVID, but it was continuing to run as they were seeing the number of cases increase, and it got huge negative backlash. The idea of people licking their fingers and licking each other's fingers and like touching phones and surfaces obviously did not hit the right tone. It wasn't sensitive to the current situation. So good example of when you really need to rethink what's currently running and make sure that it's appropriate. Again, what do my customers feel right now? What do they need right now? How can I be of service? And this probably would not have checked any of those boxes. Now, after you evaluate what you're currently running, it may be an opportunity to reimagine what it could be. Here's some examples. Some of them are real and some of them are just artist imaginings of what brands could be doing. Right there in the middle is Coca-Cola. It is in Times Square. So here is an example of a trusted brand, a brand that we know and is very familiar, and they're saying staying apart is the best way to stay united. They've taken a play on their classic Coca-Cola logo. You've got Chiquita, who's no longer on the banana because she's home, she's self-quarantining. And then you have some of these logos that artists have reimagined in the era. But I think what it illustrates is that we can bring creativity and we can be appropriate and we can be sensitive to tone, and we can also still be authentic to our we're reimagining. If we go back to the healthcare example and what our healthcare clients and others should be doing, again, what do customers feel? Or what do patients feel? They feel anxious. What do they need? They need to be reassured. They need information. They trust you as a resource. So here is an example from Mayo Clinic. Now, I recognize we are not all Mayo Clinic, but there's some lessons here that we can take. This is a microsite they've put up specifically to address questions and concerns around COVID-19. You can see they're using reassuring imagery, forward-reaching, optimistic imagery. They're not showing, an image of the nasty little virus that we've all seen floating around. They've provided links to not only internal sources on their website, but links to third-party resources. So they've adjusted their marketing and their content strategy to validate information and say, this is what's important for our communities to know. And so they've put all of those links there in a really intuitive search bar. And then they also are still investing in their long-term brand health. There's a whole section here that's, what is Mayo doing to be part of the solution? Well, we research and we're doing all of these things, and here's how we're contributing. And I believe there's even if you want to continue to support our efforts. So the question about nonprofits, here's an example of a nonprofit weaving in appropriate messaging and doing a very appropriate, I think, call to action. So there is an example of a healthcare organization really thinking about what their patients and their communities need to hear right now and providing for that. Here is an example from Campus USA Credit Union. Full disclosure, we do work with Campus USA, and I think some of them might be on the line. So hello, friends. Credit unions are really integral to community. It's kind of tied to their mission. So if you're looking for ways that you can still be present and you can reassure members that you will be there, that you are stable, that you are trustworthy, you can kind of look to examples like what Campus has done here. They shifted some of their advertising to we're all in this together, even if we're apart. Again, reaffirming we're going to be here for you. We are stable. We are trustworthy. We will help you through this. We're still visible, and they're still supporting that brand health, which is so important. There are a lot of ways that we can do this, and I know that not all of us have huge budgets to play with, and we can't do huge things maybe in terms of production value, but here's a great example from USAA that is really accessible for all of us. So take a look.
In nearly 100 years serving the military community, we've seen you go through tough times.
And every time, you've shown us you're much tougher.
Your heart, courage, and commitment has always inspired us.
And now it's no different.
So we're here with financial strength, stability, and experience you can depend on.
And the online tools you need.
Because you have always set the highest standard.
And reaching that standard is what we're made for.
So what a great job. Their team members sharing a similar message, same sort of voice, same sort of consistency, and yet reframing it to be very appropriate. And so great job to USAA. Here's an example of an email blast that's really appropriate. West Elm is a furniture and home interior. And you can see here determining what matters. What are they feeling? They're feeling stressed in their homes. They might really be thinking about what a home office can look like, because some of these behaviors may carry over. Again, work from home, I don't think is going to go away anytime soon. What's something they can offer that's of service? They're giving 20 to 40% off. That's their contribution. What are they doing to help? And they're continuing to build the brand. So you see that section down there at the bottom. Why West Elm? What makes us special? What makes us different? Why should you shop with us? This is also maybe an opportunity to rise to the occasion. You know, your millennials and your Generation Z, they are watching the way all of our brands behave right now, and they are paying attention to the way you treat your customers, your patients, your members, whoever you're dealing with, as well as the way you treat your employees. So you can see here, there's a lot of focus on doing the right thing right now, not only just because it's the right thing to do, but because it really matters to the next generation of decision makers. And speaking of rising to the occasion, here is a wonderful commercial from Doordash. Take a look.
Restaurants have always been there for you. A place to celebrate, to take a first date, to grab a meal between soccer practice and piano. And even though tables are empty at the moment, the kitchens are full, prepping everything so it's just right, keeping customers safe, and making the food as delicious as ever. They're still there for you. Now you can be there for them. While the doors may be closed, the kitchens are open for delivery.
I love this ad. I get a little emotional every time I see it, because I know how important our local businesses, our small businesses, our small local restaurants are. And I think DoorDash does a really good job of tying their brand into a greater, more mission-based message. And if you notice, they never actually say DoorDash in the commercial, which I really love as well. But they still get all kinds of credit, I think, for doing it. So what are your to-dos in this last section? Inform your decisions. Make sure that you get the data. You get information about what your consumers want, need, and feel right now, which may be different than how it has ever been. You should be looking at what you're currently running and making very quick decisions about whether it meets the current needs, whether it feels appropriate in tone, and whether it's sensitive to the current situation. And then you may need to reimagine your strategy. But again, find the opportunity. Find what your brand looks like, not only today, but into the future. If we do this well, and if we do it thoughtfully, knowing that we're using all the insight that we have as marketers, and then working together with our teams and with our leadership, we can not only survive, but we can thrive if we make these good decisions today. So that is the end of this first in the series of Lunch Bites. Next week's topic is understand your customers in a downturn. So we're going to be talking a little bit about recession psychology and helping you perhaps understand where your customers, where your members, where your patients are right now, as well as where you fit into the scheme of things. And that may help you with some messaging. I would love to open it up to questions. I am going to shift right here. And again, I have a colleague monitoring the chat on the other side. So she's going to help me out here. If you want to hang on for some questions, we're happy to take questions from you. Nicole says, thank you so much for great information and some action steps. We are so happy to do it. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us. I have a question about how would you approach C-suite about the discussion regarding marketing? I think that most of our marketing professionals, our clients that we work with, you really know your brand very well. You know your brand voice, also know your consumers. So just like any situation, your C-suite looks to you for that advice. So again, we want you to be proactive. We don't want you to wait until the C-suite says, here's what we've decided. We want you to be doing the research, looking at your consumer behavior and putting together recommendations and taking those proactively to your C-suite. Here's what we're seeing. Here's what we recommend. Here's what we would like to develop. I think that most C-suite professionals, and if any of you in the chat are C-suite, please let me know if you agree. I think they appreciate right now they're dealing with a lot of questions and they are dealing with a lot of things on their end that they would love to hear from you what is best to do for marketing because you're the expert. So help them, help the brand by leveraging what you know and what you can do. I have another question. Where should we start on marketing research? It seems like a big lift. Yes, it is a big lift. And, so Kantar is a research group, K-A-N-T-A-R, as well as Dynata, D-Y, I want to make sure I spell it right, D-Y-N-A-T-A. They have some good general consumer information out there for you. You can also work with partners to do selective research for you. We've done research for clients before. The good news is right now they're seeing huge participation in marketing research. Why is that? It's because people have time to participate. Now, your best bet is to focus on marketing research that is quantitative, not qualitative. So online surveys are great right now. I would not undertake huge long-term strategy sort of things, but if we want to look at short-term strategies, we're looking at some current consumer feedback. Quantitative surveys are really popular. Qualitative is a little difficult because we can't have that face-to-face. It's not a good time for focus groups. So that's where I would focus right now for your marketing research. I've got a question. Are there any considerations for response in regulated industries? Such as healthcare, financial. One of the great things is in our highly regulated industries, there are procedures and protocols in place to make sure that we're maintaining a standard that meets all of our regulatory compliance and all of those necessary boxes get checked. So I think you still have to go through all of those steps, and we still have to work with our compliance departments to make sure that we're meeting those requirements. But I think now is a time for everybody to be working a little at a faster pace. So if we can get some general messaging, I refer back to like the Campus USAA example where they said we're all in this together. Obviously, there's not a lot of disclosure that has to happen with the message like that, but it was on message for their brand and it made a lot of sense. I think this is when we really have to lean on our expertise so that we can move quickly and yet still maintain all of the requirements we have for regulation. Okay, so I have a question about, is it beneficial to develop a message? This is from a mentoring organization. So for my nonprofits, focus on relationships. We may not be able to deliver the same sort of service or the same sort of value that we have, but we still can reaffirm those relationships. So again, what do in this case, if you're a nonprofit, your customers are twofold. You have your mentors and your mentees. So you're going to have to think about what's the message, what do they feel right now, what do they need right now, how can I be of service? So your mentors are like everybody else. They're trying to see how can I help during this time. Your mentees are saying, what does my mentorship even look like? So we need to maybe provide resources to help them answer those questions. Maybe that is setting up resources to help mentors connect with mentees. Here's some suggestions for ways you can be connecting during this time of social distancing. Maybe you are facilitating by breaching the learning curve for some of those resources right now. So maybe somebody who's not familiar with Zoom, you could put together quick, here's how to on Zoom, connect with your mentee on Zoom. Those are just some ideas. Really keep reaffirming the relationship, keep reaffirming the importance of the work that you do. Even though right now it may feel a little overwhelming. Again, most research coming out of the big research firms is saying that consumer sentiment says this is going to be back to normal, whatever normal looks like, in about 6 months. So we need to focus on short-term strategies and long-term brand health. I have a question about donor development. Should we put donor development on hold right now? I have seen organizations doing different things here. I've seen some that have stopped with their donor development and instead they are just reaffirming relationships, which is obviously a huge part of donor development. So is donor development stopping altogether? No, we're still maintaining relationships. We're keeping those communications open. Are we making direct asks right now? I think it depends on the organization. In a fight for survival, I think, you may have to consider what is an appropriate ask right now. I have seen some organizations put out calls. We are suffering. We're a museum. Our doors aren't open. We're not generating revenue. But here are all the things we are doing to get out in the community. Or we're an arts organization and art is important more than ever, but we can't be open. We need your support to get us through this. Or even public radio making requests saying we're not going to do our standard drive, but we do ask that you maybe consider increasing your support. So I think it's a case-by-case basis. And I think, again, ask yourself the questions of how can you be of service first, serve well, and then you can make an ask if it feels appropriate. Hi, Megan. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And thank you all of you for your really great comments on, I'm just now getting to see some of the chats, and I very much appreciate all of you for joining us here today. We are going to maybe take some of these questions offline. We will respond. Again, we hope to see you all next week for understanding your customers in a recession. So for now, thank you all for your time. Thank you all for your efforts. Thank you all for your extraordinary work during this unprecedented time. I said it again. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.